Tensions erupted in a Dallas courtroom this morning when U.S. Representative Jasmine Crockett found herself in an unexpected legal battle, not as an attorney, but as a defendant. What began as a brief court appearance spiraled into a fierce confrontation with a notoriously belligerent judge, setting off a chain of events that could shake the very foundations of judicial accountability. The courtroom was already buzzing when Jasmine Crockett pushed open the heavy oak doors. Her heels clicked sharply against the polished tile floor. It was 9:27 a.m., 12 minutes past the scheduled hearing time. The delay was unusual for her, but unavoidable. Moments earlier, she had been pulled into an urgent call from the House Oversight Committee regarding a classified whistleblower report tied to abuses at a North Texas prison. She couldn't ignore it when lives were potentially at stake. The courtroom, known locally as Pearson's Pit, due to the judge's reputation for berating young lawyers and first-time offenders, fell silent the moment she entered. All eyes turned to her. Judge Michael Pearson, an aging figure with a furrowed brow and a penchant for public humiliation, leaned forward from his bench like a hawk spotting easy prey. "Well," Pearson drawled slowly, rifling through papers with theatrical disdain. "Congress or not, punctuality matters in my courtroom." Crockett stood tall, adjusting the lapel of her dark blazer. Her voice was steady. "Your Honor, I apologize for the delay. I received an urgent call related to my duties as a member of Congress." "I'm not interested in your excuses," he cut in, slamming the gavel once for good measure. "Contempt of court. $500 fine." A few murmurs rippled through the back benches where reporters had already begun scribbling furiously. Crockett raised an eyebrow, but didn't waver. "You're fining me for a 12-minute delay due to an emergency tied to my congressional duties?" Pearson's lips curled into a smirk. "I'd find anyone who disrespects this court." Her jaw tightened. This wasn't about tardiness. It was personal. The room could feel the tension between them. It started to hum like static electricity. The reason for her appearance was ironically benign. A traffic violation mistakenly reported under her name due to an administrative error in a city vehicle registry. She had chosen to appear in person rather than let a staffer handle it, out of a desire to stay on equal footing with her constituents. But what should have taken minutes was now turning into a spectacle. Jasmine stepped calmly to the podium. "May I speak, Your Honor?" "Speak, by all means," he said mockingly, leaning back in his chair. "Entertain us." Her expression didn't falter. "Your Honor, I've been a public defender and a legislator. I'm well aware of courtroom protocol. I'm also aware of judicial discretion and how it's applied inconsistently to defendants based on their age, ethnicity, or professional status." A faint murmur of agreement rippled through the courtroom. Pearson's eyes narrowed. "Are you implying this court is biased?" "I'm stating that patterns of excessive punishment warrant scrutiny. I've seen countless young defendants fined, jailed, or humiliated for infractions others shrug off. This court has a reputation." Pearson's tone dropped to a cold, calculated whisper. "You're skating dangerously close to another contempt charge. And you're skating dangerously close to violating the judicial code of conduct," Jasmine shot back, pointedly referencing Canon 3B. A palpable unease swept the courtroom. Pearson, visibly rattled, fumbled to regain composure, masking his unease with a forced chuckle. "You think you can come in here and lecture me on ethics? If no one does, you'll keep bullying defendants who can't fight back," Jasmine snapped, her tone cutting. The audience's attention was now fully gripped. Phones discreetly recording, reporters whispering among themselves. Jasmine pressed on, her disdain palpable. "The purpose of a courtroom is to uphold dignity, not stroke egos. I'll pay the $500 fine today, but I'll also file a formal complaint with the Texas Commission on Judicial Conduct. And since you've chosen to make this personal, I'll submit data to support a systemic review of your practices in this court." Pearson's face flushed red, his gavel idle. Outside the courtroom, Alyssa Torres, Jasmine's communications director, was already fielding calls from local media tipped off to the situation. A city council member texted, relieved someone was finally standing up to Pearson. Judge Pearson tried to regain control. "You'll find complaints against judges rarely go anywhere, but if you want to waste your time, be my guest." Crockett's gaze was piercing. "This isn't about wasted time, Judge Pearson. It's about setting a precedent. If someone like me, with legal training, public visibility, and congressional authority, can be treated this way, imagine what happens to those without those protections. The hearing was officially adjourned, but no one moved. Pearson banged his gavel twice. "Get out of my courtroom." Jasmine didn't flinch. Her phone buzzed with a text from a former court staffer who'd caught the incident on local feeds. "You're dead right about him. I've got proof." Crockett paused outside the courthouse, surrounded by cameras, and addressed the press. "I was found in contempt today for a 12-minute delay due to a congressional emergency. But the real contempt is what happens daily in that courtroom. To young black and brown defendants, to those without privilege. Today we start asking questions. What began as a simple court mix-up was rapidly escalating into a clash between justice and power, between intimidation and resistance. And though the immediate confrontation was over, the real fight was just beginning. Behind Pearson's bench lay years of unchecked rulings, and Jasmine had just lit the fuse. Back at her office that afternoon, the story had already hit major Texas outlets. "Congresswoman found in contempt by controversial judge," headlines blared. The grainy, shaky video clearly showed Jasmine Crockett, unflinching, facing down Pearson's barbs. On Twitter, the controversy swelled. Lawyers, activists, and public defenders nationwide shared and dissected it with hashtags like Dark Pearson Pitfall and Justice Not Ego. Inside the George L. Allen Courts building, though, the mood was less digital and far more personal. Michael Pearson, seething, paced his chambers, his mahogany desk a silent witness to his fury. His phone buzzed incessantly. Dana, his young assistant, tried to fade into the background as he ranted to no one in particular. "She thinks she's going to intimidate me?" Pearson hissed, tossing his phone onto the desk. On her notepad on the table, Dana reflected on the reporters and tweets aiming to destabilize 30 years of judicial power. She struggled to accept the behavior of the commission head. Her office had reached out for a statement on this morning's incident, and the Bar Association had just emailed her about his remarks. She'd wasted her time. He turned and handed me the uncensored transcript of the hearing. Meanwhile, Jasmine was already 3 steps ahead in her Dallas district. She'd called a quiet war room with her legislative team, legal advisors, and 2 trusted former public defenders from her early days in the field. Laptops glowed, coffee cups lined the table. Everyone spoke in sober, determined tones. "I've already filed the misconduct inquiry request," Jasmine announced. "But we need more testimony. Anecdotes won't cut it. We need to identify sentencing patterns, disparities, gender bias, racial profiling, anything with his name on it in trial data." "I've got the transcripts," Terrence, her legal researcher, chimed in. "I'm cross-referencing motions and objections Pearson's denied over the past 5 years. There's a spike, especially among defendants under 30. Media's reaching out for comment," Alyssa, her comms director, added. "National outlets, MSNBC, CNN, even The Hill. We won't shy away from going public," Jasmine said, "but strategically. This isn't just about me. It's about Pearson's courtroom as a microcosm of systemic issues everywhere. We need to tell that story." Outside the courthouse, a crowd of protesters and reporters had gathered, hoisting signs with slogans like, "Justice isn't personal," and "Power isn't above oversight." Others simply chanted, "We've got your back, Jasmine." Back inside, Judge Pearson wasn't backing down. He opened the afternoon session with a chilling address to a stunned room. "This court's decorum was undermined by a flagrant act," he said, voice cold and steady. "Let me be clear. This courtroom is not a state, and this gavel is not a prop. The next person who confuses the two will be sanctioned to the fullest extent of the law." The threat hung in the air like fog, but with every word he spoke, another crack appeared in the marble pedestal he stood on. Across town, Jasmine quietly met with 2 young lawyers who'd worked under Pearson years ago. They were cautious, nervous, but resolute. "You're right," one, Marissa said. "He berates public defenders and dismisses them. He's harsher on rulings if a defendant talks back." "Did you ever report it, Jasmine?" she asked. Each time, there'd been no response. Her jaw clenched. "It stops now." That evening, she appeared on national TV. Under studio lights, facing a seasoned political anchor, she spoke with the same poise, clarity, and steel she'd shown that morning. "I didn't challenge Judge Pearson because I'm a politician, but because I'm a lawyer and a black woman who's seen firsthand what unchecked judicial power looks like when it preys on the vulnerable." A $500 fine is a slap on the wrist for someone like me, but that same man has handed down sanctions that upended lives of people who couldn't fight back. The clip went viral before the interview even ended. By the next morning, Judge Pearson's courtroom was under a spotlight. A coalition of civil rights lawyers. Following the public exposure of Judge Pearson's questionable judicial practices, the popular response was immediate and massive. As the DA's office pledged to re-examine hundreds of prior cases, anonymous tips began pouring in, detailing alarming experiences in Pearson's court. One particularly searing email recounted how an individual received 30 days in jail for simply disagreeing with the judge. The defendant, just 19 at the time, had been denied the right to contact counsel. Amid the growing controversy, Pearson doubled down. He beefed up his staff, tightened security, and demanded reporters stay outside the building. But on the third day of this escalation, he made a fatal misstep. Jasmine, undeterred, returned to the courtroom, not as a defendant, but as an observer. Sitting quietly in the back row, no cameras or press in tow, she took notes silently. Her presence didn't escape Pearson, and it visibly unnerved him. That morning, a 22-year-old Lon Vasquez faced a public disturbance charge. It was his first offense, with no prior record. His lawyer argued for dismissal, citing lack of evidence. Pearson denied the motion without explanation. Then Lon made the mistake of raising his hand. "Sir, I didn't even know—" he began before Pearson cut him off. "One more word, and you're in contempt." Jasmine's pen froze on the page. Leon glanced at his lawyer, who whispered for him to hush. Pearson squinted. "You know what? 30 days in county jail. Maybe that'll teach you how to behave in a courtroom." Gasps and muffled curses swept the room. Jasmine stood slowly, catching her breath. Her assistant immediately texted, flagging the moment as ripe for media outreach. It was already too late for Pearson to backtrack. She left the courtroom silently, but her phone rang before she hit the elevator. "He did it again," the message read. Pearson, oblivious to the scale of events unfolding around him, carried on as usual. Gavels banged, voices rose, motions were denied. But outside, the fallout snowballed fast. State lawmakers began calling for a judicial inquiry. The Texas Bar announced an emergency session to review public complaints. The Bar Association started reaching out to former defendants. At the center of this storm, Jasmine Crockett remained calm, watching and documenting. She wasn't after revenge. She was building a case, and she wasn't alone. By week's end, Jasmine Crockett's office was flooded with legal filings, first-hand accounts, and video recordings of Judge Pearson in his courtroom. Some came from former staff. Others were quietly captured by defendants and their families. What started as a personal standoff had morphed into a full judicial reckoning. She hadn't called for the protest, but people showed up anyway. Hundreds gathered outside the courthouse daily, wielding signs airing their pain and demanding justice. "My rights matter. Courts aren't thrones," the signs read. "Thank you, Jasmine." Inside, Pearson remained defiant. He issued rulings with restrained aggression, each verdict laced with the bitterness of a man watching his power crumble. The spotlight was now permanently fixed on him. Every move in his courtroom dissected in real time by lawyers, reporters, activists, and even fellow judges. The Texas Commission on Judicial Conduct announced a formal review of Pearson's court, citing disturbing patterns of punitive behavior inconsistent with judicial ethics. It would have been a striking development in normal circumstances, but this was far from normal. Jasmine didn't just sit back and watch. She turned pressure into policy. She drafted a bipartisan bill calling for mandatory ethics training. Amid rising concern over bias in the judicial system, a major legislative push emerged. Dubbed the Courts Accountability and Fairness Enforcement Act, or CAFE, nodding to the idea that justice should be as accessible and transparent as an open public space, the ambitious law proposed heightened oversight of local courts. It also mandated an independent review board, made up of retired judges, public defenders, and community reps, to audit courts statewide. The bill gained traction fast, galvanizing lawmakers who'd previously dodged judicial reform. They suddenly found their inboxes flooded with letters, calls, and urgent pleas from constituents. The tipping point was Jasmine's searing testimony before a subcommittee. Jasmine delivered a precise, unflinching account of what she'd faced, backed by hundreds of pages of evidence and statements. She stressed that the issue wasn't one judge. It was a system that let silence pass for justice. She warned that if such wrongs could happen in Dallas, they could happen anywhere, but she vowed it wouldn't happen again on their watch. Those piercing words propelled the bill forward. Still, the courtroom fight wasn't over. Judge Pearson's disciplinary hearing day arrived. Jasmine arrived early, not as a defendant or spectator, but as a witness. Though her testimony was slated for the afternoon, her mere presence in the room sent a message. She was still there, and she was watching. Judge Pearson strode in with his usual swagger, flanked by two gray-suited lawyers. He glanced her way briefly, but Jasmine didn't look away. He sat at the defendant's table, ironically, the same spot where so many young defendants had once pleaded for fairness. The hearing's first half focused on Pearson's censure. Former public defenders testified to his erratic rulings and blatant disregard for young attorneys. Two staffers read from internal memos where Pearson called defendants kids who need a good spanking. A Latina lawyer recounted a case where Pearson dismissed her motion without hearing it, telling her to save her theatrics for immigration court. The panel stayed stone-faced as Jasmine took the stand. The room's silence was thick. She raised her hand, swore in, and sat. In a firm, unwavering voice, she recounted the events of her court appearance, the gratuitous contempt, the mocking tone, the bias cloaked as protocol. But she didn't stop there. "I'm not here to lodge a personal grievance," she said. "I'm here to call out a system. I've spoken to defendants Pearson sentenced, lawyers who feared retaliation, staff forced into silence. I ask you, what does it say about our courts when justice is more feared than crime?" Pearson's lead counsel objected to her tone, but the panel overruled. Jasmine closed her statement without notes, without theatrics, without raising her voice. Just the truth. And that truth, undeniable, was damning. By the hearing's end, the panel announced Pearson would be temporarily suspended pending further investigation. The room didn't erupt in cheers, but exhaled in relief, like a pressure valve finally released. The killing blow came 3 days later. An emergency audit of Pearson's court records uncovered consistent patterns of disproportionate sentencing, frequent motion denials without cause, and at least 42 confirmed contempt charges against minor defendants. At age 25, his disruptive attitude led to his permanent removal from the bench. But Jasmine didn't stop there. She returned to Congress with hefty legislative backing and public support. Her cafe bill passed the House with bipartisan consensus, then swiftly cleared the Senate. It was signed into law at a press conference honoring the people Pearson had silenced for years. Thus, the first Texas courtroom in history was placed under community oversight, a model later replicated in other states. Months later, a mural appeared on a Dallas Community Legal Aid Center's wall. It depicted Jasmine Crockett before a courthouse, one hand holding Justice's scales, the other propping open the courtroom door. Below, bold lettering declared, "Justice isn't won in silence, it's demanded in its presence." She never meant to become a movement's face. She just wanted justice done, for herself and for everyone forced to cower before a gavel that had long forgotten its purpose. But sometimes, the spark you strike to light your own path ends up setting the whole system ablaze. And from its ashes, something better can rise.